Have you ever felt like you were the only one trying to do the right thing in a world that has gone completely off the rails? Imagine living in a time when things were so chaotic, so far from their original design, that a total reset was needed. That's exactly where the story of Noah begins. In a world drowning in its own mistakes, one man, Noah, stood out. Genesis tells us he was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. It wasn't that Noah was perfect, but his heart was in the right place. He listened when God spoke, and God saw that the world's wickedness was great, filling his heart with pain. So God gave Noah a monumental, almost unbelievable task: build an ark, not just a boat, but a massive vessel made of cypress wood, with specific dimensions about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. Imagine the sheer scale of this project. People must have thought he was crazy, building a giant boat on dry land, with no sea in sight. The neighbors probably laughed, mocked him, and shook their heads. But Noah's faith wasn't swayed by public opinion. For decades, he and his family hammered, sawed, and pitched, trusting in a promise and a warning they couldn't yet see. Then came the next part of the instruction. Gather the animals, 2 of every kind, male and female, from the birds in the sky to the creatures that crawl on the ground. Picture the scene: a parade of creation, elephants and eagles, lions and ladybugs, all making their way, not in chaos, but in an orderly procession towards the ark. This wasn't a random collection. It was a divine preservation project, a living library of God's creation entrusted to Noah's care. Once Noah, his family, and all the animals were safely inside, God himself shut the door. Then the skies opened. It didn't just drizzle. The Bible says the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. Rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights. The water rose relentlessly, lifting the ark high above the ground, covering the fields, the towns, and eventually even the highest mountains. Everything outside the ark was washed away. Inside that floating sanctuary, surrounded by the sounds of the storm and the calls of countless creatures, can you imagine the mix of awe, fear, and profound trust Noah's family must have felt? They were tossed on a global ocean, the sole survivors of humanity, holding on to a promise from God. For months they drifted, waiting. Finally, after 150 days, the waters began to recede. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, but they didn't just burst out. Noah waited. He sent out a raven, then a dove. The first time, the dove found nowhere to land. A week later, it returned with a freshly plucked olive leaf, a sign of new life, a symbol of peace and hope that endures to this day. Finally, the third time, the dove didn't return. The earth was dry. When God commanded them to come out, Noah, his family, and all the animals stepped onto a clean, new world. Noah's first act was one of gratitude. He built an altar and gave thanks to God. In response, God made a covenant, a solemn promise, not just to Noah, but to all of humanity and every living creature. He promised never again to destroy the earth with a flood, and as a sign of this unbreakable promise, he set a rainbow in the clouds. So now, every time we see a rainbow arching across the sky after a storm, it's not just a beautiful display of light. It's a reminder of a devastating storm, but more importantly, of God's faithfulness, His mercy, and His everlasting promise of a new beginning. It's a message of hope painted across the heavens for all of us to see. Thanks for journeying with us through this incredible story. If it moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into timeless tales. We'd love to have you in our community. See you next time!